Welcome to this episode of the Brush and Soap and Blade Podcast, where we look forward to shaving every day. Welcome to episode 75 of the podcast. My name is Rick DeWeese. I'll be your host today. First off, I'd like to give you an update on the 2015 Brush and Soap and Blade Podcast Brush that's being put together and assembled by Nathan Clark. He sent me a message and let me know what was going on, so I'll give you an update. Then I got to tell you a quick story. How many of you guys out there know who Barney Fife is? I think I ran into him. I'll tell you about it. I have done something this last week that, well, some of you in the community will think is, well, blasphemous. I have, it has been with great pain and effort for the shaving community that I have done this. And you're going to have to wait and find out what it is. But it wasn't all bad, but it definitely wasn't all good. Anyhow, I'll tell you all about that. I rebuilt some brakes on my son's car, and it got me to thinking about things. Just out of curiosity, how many of you guys back in the day used to play Cowboys and Indians? What the heck happened that we don't do that as kids anymore? Something has changed, and that's kind of the rant this week, and kind of the demise of well, the morale play that we used to have as young kids. And then after the episode, if you care to stick around, I'll talk a little bit about the Upstate of South Carolina. Let's get on with this show. Well, I got a note from Nathan Clark, and he let me know how many of our brushes that we sold. We didn't sell many. We sold a dozen. We sold an even dozen, which I'm okay with that. Every little bit helps. Now, that will pay for about 3/4 of the year of, well, actually about 2/3. It'll pay for about 2/3 of the year of my podcasting fees. So for all of you that bought the 2015 Brush and Soap and Blade Podcast Brush Limited Edition by Nathan Clark, the only thing that I can say from the absolute bottom of my heart is thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for believing in me enough to go out and buy them. And it's also hopefully nice for you to know that you, in fact, have something that is exceedingly rare and exceedingly limited in quantity. So, good job. Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate it, because that allows me to go out and, well, get products and test things and have the monetary wherewithal to continue on. So I do appreciate that. It's nice. I believe I have just run into the reincarnation of Barney Fife. So I went to Staples. I had to return something and pick up something else. And I come out of Staples, and there is a state trooper. Now, just to give you an idea, the majority of state troopers that I have ever run into are at least 6 foot bigger. They're usually 6 foot plus, and they usually weigh, at least 200 pounds or, yeah, somewhere in that neighborhood, 220, something like that. So this guy's all of about maybe 5'8", 5'9", about my height, skinny as a rail. And I'm standing out there, I'm looking at something before I walk off in case there's a problem with it. I just take it right back to the store there. And he comes walking up, and I say, "How you doing today?" And he looked like I had just shot him. It seemed to just startle him, and I couldn't help but in my head remember back in the old Andy Griffith days when Barney Fife, played by Don Knotts, the great comedian, kind of getting nervous and shaking when he was startled. And that's exactly what I ran into today. And I didn't have the heart to ask him if he had the one bullet in his shirt pocket. But I do believe I ran into the reincarnation of Barney Fife. Well, it is another cold morning here in South Carolina. I'm seeing the vapors from my breath in the car. Not a typical thing for us, but that's okay. It is, in fact, February. So this morning, I did something that was, well, different. And some of you may think, blasphemy! But I did it anyhow. What did I do? Well, just for sheer curiosity's sake, I did a shave with a Gillette Goodnews two-bladed disposable razor. Now, I haven't picked up a Goodnews razor in a long time. And quite honestly, I wanted to see, well, just what kind of shave I could get out of one of the things. You know, I have used double-edged, razors, and I have used Schicks. I have used Gillettes, mainly Gillettes. I've used single-edged, Stars and Evereadys and Gems. I have used injectors and straights. So I believe that I have run the gambit, at least with some experience, of just about everything that's out there and, available in the traditional shaving world, with the exception of some of the really, wild ones, or expensive ones. Mongoose comes to mind, Cobra, some of the other things. But the principle of operation is still, well, pretty much the same. So, I wanted to see. So I went ahead and soaked the brush, the Badger brush in this case, and I was looking at my selections of soap, and there was a sample of Soap Commander, Love in this case, and I said, yeah, I haven't used a sample with my Badger brush here that I can recall, so I went ahead and said, well, let's see how it does with a sample. And of course, it did marvelously. And quite honestly, after having, it's a small sample that I got from Soap Commander, and I love his samples. I love his soaps. But the soap fits nicely in the palm of the hand, and with the Badger brush doing its job, I almost got an affinity there for lathering in your hand, and I know some people do that, and I understand a little bit better now because it was a very nice lather, and quite honestly, I don't know that I gained a whole lot by going from the lather that I had in my hand to lathering up the brush in a bowl. I don't know that I gained just a great deal. So I can understand a little better. And the thing that's interesting is that previously I don't know that boar brushes or even some of my littler Badger brushes, ever did a good job lathering in the hand. So I may have to try that. I may have to try hand lathering just to, see what it's all about and see if I can do that. And, maybe that's the way to go. I don't know. So back to the story. So I lathered up with the Soap Commander's Love, which is a rose-scented soap. Great little soap, by the way. And proceeded to do a shave that was a little different with the Gillette Goodnews two-bladed disposable razor. Now, the reason that I say it was a little different, one of the things that we tout in traditional wet shaving is no pressure. Don't put any pressure on the blade. Let the blade do the work. And I attempted to replicate that, albeit with a very almost pencil lightness razor, which has difficulty in and of itself. I attempted to do that with this Gillette Goodnews, and I went in the traditional, at least for me, patterns. Where I have one that is kind of cross grain and or with the grain, and another one that is against the grain, and then some final touch-ups. So, what were my observations? First off, the light touch that is relatively easy to maintain with a metal razor, just because of the weight, is exceedingly difficult to gauge and to make happen with a Gillette Goodnews. And what I found myself doing is essentially approximating the weight of a normal metal razor with something that weighs next to nothing. So there was some variation in there, but from that aspect, it was, I don't know, it wasn't difficult. It was just something that I had to, focus on, and it's not something that I am used to having to focus on. So it did have that little difference. Now, the shave itself, I didn't have any difficulties or anything. The with grain pass and against the grain pass went well. The neck touch-ups. Okay, this is what I found. I found that I actually had to do more touch-up in those rough spots because with the light pressure, it just wasn't doing anything. It just wasn't really, it was cutting a little bit, but it wasn't doing what it needed to do. So, okay. So I finally succumbed when I had gotten just about to the end of the shave and was, I don't know. I'm not going to say struggling with the touch-up, but at least working the touch-up over and over and over again. What I ended up doing is saying, all right, look, dang it, I'll go ahead and put some pressure on this thing and see what happens. So I used a little bit of pressure, and that helped. And so there is I've come to quickly realize that there is a thin line between, a little pressure and no pressure in the cutting action of a Gillette Goodnews. So, at the end of it all, what were my observations? Okay. You can get a reasonable shave with a Gillette Goodnews. It's lifeless. That's the only thing that jumped to mind while it was happening, and even now later on upon reflection. It's lifeless. There's no, I don't know, it lacks a soul. It's like, holy cow, it's just, there's no, I don't know, it works. It's really interesting. It's almost like it makes the task just a chore. It makes the task the task joyless. It was really interesting. I didn't know that I would react that way, but I did. It was just, I don't know, if anybody's seen Harry Potter, and they've got the Dementors that suck the joy out of your life. Yeah, it was like that. It just, it got the job done, but it just wasn't fun. Now, granted, the Gillette Goodnews, I like the handle. The blade angle was easy to find. It shaved well. I didn't get any nicks or cuts, even when putting pressure on with the razor. But it just, anyhow, you understand, I hope. Now, I did, lather between passes. Like I've said, that's something that, especially for young guys that are listening and that have, are just coming into the hobby or whatever, you need to lather between passes. And what I do and what I've done for a long time now, and it seems to really, really help, is I will wet my hands and just lightly wet my face and then relather. And I seem to get a little bit closer shave that way in between passes. And then in kind of a ritualistic fashion, I will lean over, dry my hands before I pick up either the brush to relather or the razor to commence with the next pass. It's just one of those things that I do, but it does seem to give a little bit better shave when I do that. It's I don't know, it's a little bit more comfortable. That's why I've just been doing it. So all in all, you can, I have said that in the past that, especially getting into wet shaving, and I understand there are some people that have disposable income, out the wazoo for shaving supplies. I get that. And there are some people that, well, don't, and I get that too. I've been on both spectrums at certain times in my life, so I understand fully. The thing that, to me anyhow, has made the greatest improvement in both the quality of my shave, the quality of the aftershave feel, my skin, has been the introduction of good shaving soaps and a brush. And I have postulated previously that you could probably, if you were to start out, that I would get rid of the goo in a can that has, chemicals in it that, while may aid the performance of the goo in a can, either getting out of the can or having certain attributes on your face as you shave. They're made out of chemicals that are probably not just real good, for your face, for extended exposure, etc., for the environment, et cetera, et cetera. So, to me, I think that you could not do wrong by getting yourself a decent brush and exploring the joys of artisan soaps. And I'm gonna keep with this little Gillette two-blade Goodnews just because. Yeah, it's been a while, and I understand that. This is kind of the first outing, and so I need to get back in the swing of things, if you will. And no, I'm not going there all the time, but I did want to try it out after a while, that I have been using, traditional shaving methods. Now, as far as the shave goes, the shave itself is, I don't know. I mean, even after what would, with a double-edged or a single-edged razor, bring me something that was, very, very close, perhaps just shy of BBS, this Gillette Goodnews razor, and again, I was playing with the pressure, I will admit that, right up front, gave me a socially acceptable shave on my, a socially acceptable shave. It didn't cut as close. So that was, for all the hoopla back in the day of the two-bladed razors, one blade snagging and pulling the hair out of the skin so that you can cut it closer. Okay, well, for all that hoopla, it just doesn't deliver. At least not to the same closeness level at this point that I can get with an injector or a single-edged or a double-edged blade. Now, I will readily admit that I am not as adept with a straight razor to get that kind of closeness everywhere, but where I can, that closeness is, phenomenal. So, anyhow, that is my report on I don't know, just kind of a change of pace. And, if anybody has a desire, to whip out the torches and pitchforks, and string me up outside in the town square of the shave community for going here. Well, I understand. I will repent shortly, but this is an experiment, and hopefully it can be, I don't know, maybe something will come out of it that will intrigue or enlighten people that are listening to the podcast that, well, haven't made the switch yet. So anyhow, here I am coming back from a hike with my scouts on an absolutely beautiful, beautiful Saturday morning. And have to tell you about, well, my shave of the day. This morning, again, just to continue with the experimentation, I used the Gillette Goodnews disposable 2-blade razor, just to experiment. It'll be interesting to see if this noise comes through on the microphone. I am driving up a gravel road coming out from a valley, and, well, it's a little rough. So the shave this morning went well. I used Cavendish and my Samog boar brush, and I was concentrating not so much on the soap or the brush or anything other than my technique and usage of the Gillette Goodnews razor. And again, I don't know, it's just to see, okay? Because I think oftentimes people, especially starting out, may be, well, intimidated by the idea of, definitely the idea of a straight razor. I mean, I know how to use one, and to a certain extent, it still intimidates me from time to time. But there may be some trepidation due to the, well, aggressive look of a safety razor, or a single-edged, or something like that. And so it may be an easier transition for someone if they were to use something that they're used to, whether it's a cartridge razor or a 2-blade, disposable or something like that, but change with the idea of a decent soap and a good brush, to get away from the goo in a can. So this morning, again, I used it yesterday, and so this morning after that usage, kind of putting just a little bit more pressure on things, well, it did a better job. It still wasn't great, and I don't mean by it wasn't smooth. What I mean is just it felt, well, I don't know, lacking a little bit. And I had to concentrate on how much pressure I was putting on, not wanting to put too much for fear of nicks and cuts, but at the same time, wanting to get a good shave. So the whole idea, again, especially for young shavers or shavers that are just starting out, is make sure that you go slow. You're not trying to scrape, shave your whole face in one pass. You can do multiple small strokes to cover, a cheek, for example. And it just makes it a little bit easier. And rinse off the razor in between so you don't have to worry about clogging. And it generally makes for a better shave that way. And and then what I've been doing for a long time is rinsing a little bit between and then relathering. And the relathering aspect is important. You still may have some residual slickness from the original lather, and it's important that you don't take that for granted and think that slickness and that glide will just stay there forever, because it won't. And if you make the mistake, no matter what you use, you may end up experiencing, well, nicks and cuts and gouges and pain and that stuff. So I ended up, I actually did a 3-pass shave. And I found that, I wasn't trying to take quite as much off with each pass, which was helpful. But it was interesting. I actually find now my under the jawline for me is an area that I always have a little bit of difficulty with. And the thing that was so terribly interesting about this experience is that I actually found I had a little bit more difficulty with the disposable razor. it was almost like there was flex within the body of the razor or the blades or something that was not allowing, to get a solid contact. It's just, you think about it, and you wouldn't think that there would be any reason that either a double-edged blade or a single-edged blade and this disposable would be any different for an under-jaw area. And in fact, you would think that maybe the disposable, having the ability to flex just ever so slightly, may do better. In fact, what I found is that it did, well, worse, which was really a surprise. I had not expected or anticipated that at all. I also found that I ended up having to, the term is polishing. I had to go over an area several times to get it close enough for, my satisfaction. And again, that's not something that I have to do with one of my traditional razors, whether it be a double-edged or a single-edged. Now, I can't speak to straights because I don't have enough experience, and I will readily admit that. But for the double-edged and single-edged, I don't necessarily have to polish areas on my neck or jaw or anything like that. But with this disposable, well, I did. And again, it was not expected. It was not anticipated, and so it came to me as a bit of a surprise. Now, the other thing that I have noticed is that even after, when I get done shaving, it just doesn't feel, as smooth. It's almost like there is an imperceptible level of stubble left. Again, that I don't have with my double-edged or single-edged razors. And it's curious because, for all the hoopla about, the two blades or multi-blades being able to pull the hair out from below the skin surface and cut it off so that it's actually, cut below the skin surface in effect. For all that hoopla, it doesn't appear or it doesn't seem to work that way. Nice marketing ploy. But it's kind of like, hate to say this, but it's kind of like some of the politicians we vote for. They tell us the same things over and over again, and we vote for them, and it doesn't turn out that way. And then they tell us the same thing over and over again, and we vote for them, and it just continues forever. So it's one of those things where, I had noticed that the other day, and hadn't really said anything about it, but it does. It feels like there is just a slight roughness, almost like the hair is, the stubble is actually not as close to the skin as what I can achieve regularly with a standard double-edged or single-edged razors. And if you throw a slant in there, then that's a completely different story because it's a heck of a lot easier to get a close shave with that. So again, just a curiosity. One of the things that I hadn't really anticipated, hadn't expected, didn't think that was going to be the experience at all. But that's one of the reasons why every now and then it's good to experiment, just to challenge your own impressions on things. Is it truly that way, or is that just a perception that you have that really isn't valid? So that's why I do it, and it's something different and unique, and I say unique for me. How about that? And I don't know that I've ever talked about it. I've talked about one of the 5-bladed cartridge razors before, but never a very simple 2-bladed Gillette Goodnews. So one of the unique experiences that I've had this morning, and then of course we went on an absolutely marvelous hike, and that's where we're coming back from, and so there you go. So this morning, like I said the other day, I attempted and was successful at hand lathering. And what I ended up doing was I used a sample of Soap Commander soap again. And I used Love because I do enjoy the rose smell. Brings back a lot of memories. Anyhow, the Love soap is what I used, a small sample, held that in my hand, and proceeded to, hand lather. Had never done that before, and I just wanted to see what the difference was between that and, essentially starting to hand lather and then switching it over to a bowl. It was interesting. I found the lather was actually a little bit thicker, is a little bit richer. I guess it doesn't have to. It's already starting off in a state where it's all over your hand and well applied, and so it gives an opportunity for more to stay in the brush. Whereas when I switch it to a bowl, I'm losing all of that initial soapy goodness, if you will, that is in my hand, and then I'm spreading it and losing some of it around the inside of the bowl. So it actually worked very good. Now it was I don't know, it was a little maybe disconcerting, or I had to focus on it a little bit, because I couldn't do certain things of my normal routine because I had one hand that was full of lather. And I don't know how you guys do it. I don't know if you lather up the brush and then apply it and then relather the brush and then rinse your hand off, or what the heck you do. But I stood there with my hand kind of full of lather for 2 passes before I rinsed my hand off, just in case. Again, complete inexperience. So that's a question that I would have, is how the heck do you do that? What's your preferred method of hand lathering and possibly rinsing your hand off? So it is a question, and because heck, I don't know. That's one of the things about this. I'm no expert here. I'm learning every day, just like everybody else is. So so sometimes I make silly mistakes, and sometimes I make omissions, and hey, that's part of life, right? But anyhow, the lathering went very well. Now, I did use the Gillette Goodnews again. I find that I am applying more and more pressure. I don't know if that's as time goes on, or as I'm kind of getting used to it to determine what the differences are there. Still have, I don't know, it still does a reasonable job. I mean, it's a socially acceptable shave. It's not a great shave by any means. I'm doing, a 2-pass shave or so. And so it is better than I remember with shaving foam way back when. I mean, it is possible to do 2- and 3-pass shaves and get reasonably close shaves with a cartridge razor or disposable razor. It's not my preferred method because it doesn't. I don't know. It feels different. Even when the beard starts growing back, it feels different. It feels sharper. It's almost like it cuts it more at an angle, and so because of that, it's sharper, and that may be attributable to the fact that it is catching and pulling slightly and cutting at more of an angle, a steeper angle, if you will, whereas a double-edged razor or a single-edged razor kind of cuts almost flush straight across. The Gillette or the cartridge razor will cut kind of I don't know, maybe a 30 or 45 degree angle, so it's, I don't know, spikier, so it feels rougher. So that's one of the things that I notice. Yeah. It's not, I don't know, it's not terribly enjoyable. It hasn't been anyhow. It's been interesting, but it's really not, I don't know. There's no soul in it. There's no life in it. It's just, I appreciate, I have a connection with some of the vintage tools of the trade, and even some of the new ones, the Mercures and things that I have. It's like, there's a connection there that I enjoy that is appealing, whereas, a plastic disposable, and it may be because of the fact that it's, all plastic. I don't have the same feeling for a gem featherweight, which is a plastic handle with a metallic head, or the gem push button, which is the same kind of deal. In fact, I don't even have the same thought process or feel when I play around or use my my Mercure Bakelite, which is basically all plastic. That's probably the closest thing to a modern day razor that there is. It's using, you know, kind of the old world technology, but I feel more connected to those. Maybe it's just a personal thing. I don't know, but I do. I feel more connected to those, and that's probably what I'll do. Is I'll go from a week with this. As one of my listeners puts it, the scratch stick. I'll go from that to the Mercure Bakelite just to see, because the Mercure Bakelite, just like this Gillette Goodnews, is so light it's almost non-existent, at least in feel to the hand, which really makes it. I mean, it's a wonderful little razor, as I recall. I haven't used it in a while, so I'll go ahead and do that. I'll probably do that next week. That'll be a good transition. So I'll continue with the Goodnews scratch stick, otherwise known as the double-bladed Gillette Goodnews disposable razor. Well, I finally finished up with my experimentation / usage of the Gillette Goodnews disposable. And I got to admit, I'm thankful. It's not that it's bad. It's not that it's a bad razor or anything. It's just, I don't know. It really, every time I picked it up and every time I used it, it just struck me as lifeless, as, I don't know, just lacking something. Just, to the point of, I was going to say utilitarian, but, you know, all razors are utilitarian, but it was just so much so. It's like the basic function of shaving knocked down to its absolute base premise, and quite honestly, not doing that terribly well. I mean, it was really, I was shaving this morning, which was a good shave, by the way. I used my Plisson brush and some Cat A cream from L'Occitane, and I mean, smelled great, did great. You know, used the razor, got a pretty decent shave. Had to apply a little bit of pressure because it's you know, it's got a little bit of age on it now. It seems to dull quicker than double-edged or single-edged blades. I did notice that. And the only way to then compensate is to, well, just apply a little more pressure each time. So by the end, you know, you're pressing it into your face with a pretty good deal of force, actually. So that was something that I kind of noticed. But as I was shaving this morning, I thought to myself, you know, it's kind of like the premise that we unfortunately succumb to, you know, every couple of years when we vote for politicians, where they tell us one thing and we buy into it and we vote for them, and then they turn around and do something completely different and we're disappointed. And yeah, it's kind of like that. You know, they promise us a good shave. They've said that this is the latest and greatest technology, and of course the only reason that they would be applying that technology is for the benefit of the masses, so that we could have a good shave. That's why they've done it. At least that's what the marketing says. And so we go into the bathrooms and lather up and you know, we're wanting that excellent shave, that new latest and greatest technology, the hype, it's all there. We're waiting for it. We're desperate for it, and it fails to deliver. Yeah, it was like that. I don't know. Like I said, it's not a bad shave. It's just not a great shave. It has a tendency to create a sharper stubble, I've found. It doesn't seem to last quite as long. It's lifeless in its use. And to me, And I understand that this is personal, and I do have a tendency to enjoy traditional wet shaving with double-edged and single-edged razors, and I do have a tendency to, well, evangelize just a tad because I enjoy it so much. But to me, the shave with the Gillette Goodnews disposable razor was not enjoyable. It was not fun. There was no spark of the fact that I'm using a tool that is 70, 80 years old, 50 years old, that is still a viable tool and in wonderful shape and still able to perform its function beautifully, and it's a mastery of days gone by. It's a work of art that you hold in your hand, a piece of metal that someone has sculpted and designed to perform a function, but at the same time to look good doing it. And I think part of the experiment, part of the experience, was to have a true and clear understanding for myself that that's in fact what shaving with double-edged and single-edged razors in the morning brings to me. And quite honestly, I don't know if I would truly have, if I would have truly understood that aspect if I hadn't done this little experiment with a disposable razor. So, next week, hopefully, if everything works out all right, I will switch over to the Mercure Bakelite, which is another very lightweight razor, almost floats in the hand, defying gravity, as it were, while it's giving you a traditional shave with a wonderful double-edged blade. So we'll do that, and hopefully I will be able to find the charisma of the razor, because the ones that are 100% plastic, nah, the charisma factor is definitely lacking. So we got the front brakes on my son's car changed out yesterday, and let's see, we replaced the brake pads, the calipers, the rotors, basically everything except the brake lines. And quite honestly, if it was me, I would have replaced those as well. I'd replace those with stainless steel just because you get a much better feel. The stainless steel braided lines. What happens is the original lines are rubber hoses, and over time and with exposure to hydraulic fluid, they can swell just a little bit, and they can get a little bit soft. And so when you step on the brakes, sometimes the mushiness that you feel in an older vehicle is due to those lines actually expanding slightly. And so you're not getting the full application of hydraulic pressure going to your calipers. In fact, where it's going is to kind of bulge out, if you will, the brake lines. And putting stainless steel braided brake lines, because the stainless steel wrap holds everything very tight, and you end up getting a much more responsive brake. It's just kind of a higher performance things, but it's one of those things. All vehicles, probably more important than the pedal on the right, which is the accelerator, is the pedal on the in the center, or the big pedal on the left, depending on if it's a manual or an automatic. Probably the most important pedal is the brake pedal. You really want to have good brakes. If you don't have good brakes, that can really get you in trouble quickly. Probably more quickly than the big engines or the fast acceleration, anything like that. It's the brakes that really you need. So, when we got the car, it wasn't long after we had the car that we replaced the everything on the back side of it. So this go around, we replaced the front calipers and rotors and pads. And there was one. It was pretty apparent that the caliper was sticking, and so whenever that happens, typically the other side is probably getting ready to go, and so there's no sense in saving it. Just go ahead and replace them all at the same time. It's kind of like tires, brakes, rotors, calipers, tires. You want to do those in pairs. You want to do both sides at the same time, if at all possible. So, one of the things that dawned on me while I was doing it is so nice to have the understanding and have the tools and the knowledge and the wherewithal to be able to do things like that, on your own, without having to take it to a shop. When I look at it, it was probably $200 in parts, and if I'd have taken it to a shop and said, okay, I want new rotors, new brake pads, new calipers, go, they would have probably charged me $1,000, at least $800. And when you think about it, yeah, they would have done a good job and all, but we could do the same kind of job in the driveway and only cost us $200. So, it's interesting, and when I look back, I taught myself how to do most of the auto mechanic stuff that I do. It wasn't anything that I was formally trained for or anything like that. It's stuff that I taught myself how to do, and it started out because I didn't have any money. And every now and then I'd have something go wrong with the car, and the first time I had that happen, I did have to pay somebody to fix it, and that just annoyed the snot out of me, especially when I realized how simple the fix actually was. It's like changing the oil. Changing the oil may be a little bit messy, but I don't know. I don't know if I want to pay somebody else to do it. It's one of those things that I might rather do myself. So, changing the oil, replacing shocks, brakes, things like that. Those are all things that I can do myself. Same with like fan belts and things like that. Some of the other components, alternators and stuff, I can do all that myself. There's no need to take it to a shop. So it's interesting. It's curious. I look at people who routinely take things to shops, and now a couple of questions that pop to mind is, first off, do they know what they need to do and just don't have the tools? Or do they don't even have a clue what needs to be done? Now, to a certain extent, I'm much better if they know what to do but just don't have the tools. That's one thing. If you just absolutely don't know what to do, well, that's a little different. Because if you don't know what to do, then you're completely and totally at the mercy of the shop owners and the maintenance guys that are at the shop. And I'm not saying they're all unscrupulous people, but if somebody's going to take advantage of you, it's very easy to take advantage of someone in that situation when they're dependent on their vehicle and their vehicle's in the shop. And if they have no concept of how a vehicle works, or what can be done to fix it, it's very, very easy for the shop to inflate things, to diagnose the problem as being, well, a little more severe than what it actually is. And it's they're thinking in their mind, hey, it's we got the car, we got a customer that's willing to pay. If they're willing to pay for this, this, and this, let's go for it. So it's one of those things, so I would recommend to absolutely everybody for your vehicles to have a real, an understanding of how brake pads work, how brakes work. It's real simple, actually, to change out brake pads. You can actually change out, if you're just changing out brake pads, you can usually do that in, you could do both front brakes and changing out brake pads on a disc brake system. And you're probably looking at a half an hour. It would take you longer to jack up the tires and or jack up the vehicle and take off the tires than it would to replace the pads. It's just well, it's I don't know. If people take a vehicle to the shop for something as simple as changing out brake pads, I gotta ask, what are they thinking? Now, on the other hand, the other thing that's interesting is there's a lot of people that don't even check their brake pads. They don't know how to check a rotor to find out if it's in good shape or not. They're just they don't do that. They don't know how, and that's a bit much. So if you've got a vehicle, especially again, brakes are terribly important, and in some instances your life could depend on it. And so to not be able to look for those things, that's something that you need to consider. So I have been watching old westerns this week, and it really, I love westerns. It's just, the stories that are portrayed in westerns, in books and movies. The stories are simple, classic tales of right versus wrong. Now, granted, there may be plot twists and things to keep the excitement level up, but there is that classic story of right versus wrong and moral character and citizenship and helping your neighbor and being honest and truthful and just. And to me, that's what westerns are. They're kind of an extension of what's right and what's good, or at least what should be right and good. And so it always, granted, there were always stories of Cowboys and Indians where everybody, gets bent out of shape because we're oppressing someone. And I understand that part of it, but ultimately at its core, when you're a kid, you're not thinking about oppression or anything. You're thinking about something much more base than that. Right and wrong. The Cowboys, of course, were always the good guys, and the Indians were, of course, always the bad guys, and it was just a name, because in the end, all you were trying to do is have right versus wrong. Cops and robbers, same principle. Right versus wrong. And it's interesting that we've gotten to a point in society that, well, right versus wrong, there's maybe more gray than black and white, and to have a child go out and play a game that pits right versus wrong is, well, just, that's bad, that's evil, that's something that shouldn't be done. They'll be scarred for life. Maybe so. Maybe they will be scarred for life. Maybe they'll be scarred for life in their own identities, that right is a good way to go, and wrong, well, you don't want to go there. But of course, as a society at this point, we can't do that. We have to come up with different names and different actors, because, making it clear cut and understanding right versus wrong, just, well, you can't do that. And of course, any group of people that upholds right versus wrong needs to be ridiculed, needs to be ostracized. To a certain extent, that's exactly what happens, well, with religion. Religion gets beat up. Why? Well, they shouldn't have the moral high ground. Well, whether it's moral or not, the concept is right versus wrong. Why should you beat up an organization for that? The Boy Scouts are another one. Right versus wrong. Good moral character. Well, they don't allow this group. Okay, maybe not. But they still profess right versus wrong. If you want to have a group that professes right versus wrong that includes the people that you want, well, start one. No, we can't do that. We have to be part of this group. And essentially what happens over time is you dilute it. And it's the same concept as getting rid of cowboys and Indians and cops and robbers and the playgrounds. We've diluted it to the point where it's meaningless and it's no longer an understanding moral principle, a base concept of our children, of our upbringing. And when you get rid of that, what do you have left? Again, it kind of goes back to, do you have a creed? Do you have a moral compass? Do you have a code that you live by? It doesn't matter what it is. It could be religious. It could be just strictly moral. It doesn't matter. Do you have one? And if you take a child and disallow them the ability to create that moral compass as they're growing up because, well, you won't let them play cops and robbers or cowboys and Indians or good versus bad, what do they have? What do they have at this point? They have marketing. And it ends up the marketers just figure out how to persuade people that this is good and this is right. And is that what you want? Do you want marketers to come up with this stuff, or do you want your children to be able to figure it out on their own as they play and as they experience life? And isn't it funny that back when people used to play cops and robbers and cowboys and Indians, where would they do so? Outside. And now what's the problem? Too many kids playing inside. If they're playing at all, other than a computer game, they're not getting any fresh air. They're not being exposed to the outside world. They don't necessarily know their neighbors or their neighborhood. They don't interact with people because they're too busy being tied into a machine. So we've eliminated that too, and apparently that's a good thing. At least that's what they want you to believe. I, on the other hand, grew up with Westerns. Grew up playing cowboys and Indians, cops and robbers, good versus bad. We used to play Army. There was a bad guy. There was a good guy. It was a moral play, just like on the old-time Westerns. And in the moral play, sometimes, just sometimes, the person you thought was the bad guy won. Why? Because he stood for something. Because he didn't bend, usually. Because he had a creed. Because he had a belief system of some type. And again, don't misunderstand. It doesn't necessarily mean religious. Could be anything. Could be a belief in chickens should rule the world. I don't care. Doesn't matter. Question is, if you have that belief system, do you stick by it, or do you waver all over the place? Are you using a belief system of whatever type as a guidepost, or are you just kind of skirting around every issue that you can because you don't know, or you don't have an understanding one way or the other? I got a lot of, the last time I talked about this, and I talked about having a creed, there were a lot of people that wrote in that, well, thought I was talking about religion. I'm not. Doesn't matter if a person is practicing a specific religion or even believes in a specific religion. I'm okay if they don't. My question is that if you're a good person, typically it means that you have a creed or a moral compass that you use to guide your actions. How do you know, just for example, if you don't have a religious foundation, how do you know the difference between right and wrong, and how do you act on the right and not on the wrong? If you have a moral compass, if you have a creed, if you have a guidepost, you can make those determinations and those decisions. And usually, under those circumstances, you end up doing the right thing. We're all human. You don't always do the right thing. But 9 times out of 10, you do, because you have that moral compass and that moral guidepost and an understanding of the difference between right and wrong, and you have chosen through some mechanism to do right. Now, On the other hand, there are some people that also have a compass and have chosen to do wrong, and they're very consistent at it. But there is a difference between right and wrong, and the question that I asked way back when was, do you have a creed? Do you have something that guides you in your daily life, some set of principles? And again, it doesn't have to be religious. Even something as simple as the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's the golden rule. That is not religious. But there are many people that have used that very successfully as their guidepost, as their creed, as their moral compass. And it's a fine one. The question wasn't whether or not you have a religion when I say creed. The question is do you have a base concept that you go by? Something that grounds you in reality. Something that allows you to make a determination between right and wrong. Do you have that? And then I would ask the question, to expound just a little bit, have we taken that ability away from our children? Have we taken it away because we have outlawed cowboys and Indians, cops and robbers on the playgrounds? We have eliminated the ability of young children to carry out moral plays in their playing on a daily basis. We've eliminated that ability because if you have a moral play, that means you have winners and losers, and well, somehow, for some reason, in today's society, that's a bad thing. But my question is it? Is it a bad thing to have winners and losers if you're fighting between good and bad?
Well, that concludes this episode of the Brush and Soap and Blade Podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you have some suggestions or would like a topic covered, drop me an email at BrushnSoapnBlade@gmail.com or give me a call at 864-372-6234 or contact us on Twitter at BrushnBlade. You can also visit us at our blog, BrushnSoapnBlade.wordpress.com. As always, we're available on iTunes and Stitcher.
So it has been an absolute gorgeous day, again, a gorgeous weekend here in the upstate of South Carolina. And I had to laugh. I was hiking with my scouts this weekend, and one of the moms was saying that she had visited Columbia, and the people in Columbia, which is down in the middle part of the state, were asking her how she could stand living up here with, well, the ruffians, you know, the ones that, I mean, my gosh, they have concealed weapons permits, and almost everybody carries, and, you know, we've got breweries and you know, moonshine places and distilleries, and, you know, I mean, it's like, it's the Wild West up here. And she looked at him and she said, yeah, it is. I like it quite well. And if you're uncomfortable with that, you should stay right here. And don't come to visit. Geez. It really makes me enjoy the upstate of South Carolina. I mean, don't get me wrong. There is a historical, absolutely historical nature in the way that we live up here. For those of you that don't know, the area was originally settled by the Scotch-Irish, and the Scotch-Irish, when they came here, built the equivalent of clans and clan houses and carried on that tradition that they had in Scotland and Ireland, and they were, well, in a lot of people's terms, exceedingly rough and tumble, in the fact that they didn't mind a good fight. They didn't mind, you know, their idea of horsing around was to, you know, have, well, fun. And so in that regards, they were kind of similar to the Indian inhabitants that were here. And quite honestly, just like today, the inhabitants then of the Upstate really just wanted to be left the heck alone. The government can go on and do whatever but somewhere else and just, get out of our lives and leave us alone. That was kind of the thought. Now, when the British overstepped their bounds, shall we say, just a little bit, it turned out that in doing so, one of the things that they also did was threaten the Scotch-Irish clans up here in the Upstate. And in doing so, they thought that they would keep the Scotch-Irish out of the battle. And in fact, all it did was, piss them off. And because of that, the Scotch-Irish clans that were here gathered their men and made it to a place that is very historical called Kings Mountain. If you don't know the story of Kings Mountain, might be worth a quick Google search and find out what happened there at Kings Mountain, where the Scotch-Irish and the frontiersmen basically of the day took on the British military and just pretty much annihilated them. And in the process, then went down to cow pens and continued that thumping. And after that, essentially, it turned the tide of the war. It wasn't it wasn't long after that Cornwallis was giving up to Washington, and there you go. So there has been a long history in the upstate of South Carolina and in the mountainous tail end, if you will, of the Appalachian area that includes, the upstate of South Carolina, the northern part of Georgia, bits and pieces of Tennessee, those areas, the North Carolina areas in western North Carolina, that whole Appalachian region was and still is, for the most part, a bunch of very independent thinking people who have a tendency to hold honor in rather high regard, and they really just want to be left alone. They're great friends if you befriend them. They're great enemies if you make them mad. And it's been that way, for a long time. So, it was curious when talking to this person to hear that, some in the lower part of the state think that we're a bunch of ruffians up here, and I'm thinking if that's their definition, then we're all that and probably a little bit more. Thank you very much. Please don't come visit. If you can't handle it by the rules that we live by, guess what? Just, stay home. Stay on the porch. I'm sorry. We'll try to speak slowly so you can understand the concept of freedom and liberty and independence. But, perhaps I digress. That's just one of the ways that, I don't know. When I look around and think about all of the people that I have met during my time here in the upstate of South Carolina, it is really those very concepts that kind of come forth in just about every encounter. Maybe not blatantly, but subliminally, it's there. It is a concept. It is a thread that goes throughout life here in the upstate. And, I thank God every day that I made the decision many, many years ago that this, in fact, was where I wanted to raise my family. And, I thank God that I have been able to, and that my children have been instilled with those very same ideals of independence, freedom, liberty, and understand that there's meaning behind it, and it's not just words. So anyhow, that is my that's kind of my thought on that.